Anthony Albanese announced an inquiry into the COVID pandemic yesterday, ruling out a royal commission.
Given the enormous dislocation, the stress, of course, loss of life, the economic impact of the pandemic, it is appropriate that when we reached a certain period that we would have an inquiry. It's a commitment I made before the election.
The COVID inquiry will specifically be blocked from assessing the actions of individual states during the pandemic. And that might make you angry because to many the pandemic was marked by bitter feuds between our state leaders and dramatically fluctuating policies. It led to families being shut out of state borders and cities being locked down for months and months at a time with very little evidence it was helping to curb numbers. It was such a strange decision to rule out that specific area of investigation out of scope that we actually had widespread agreement in the media. The Guardian led with that point, highlighting the fact that states would be excluded in their headline. And Phil Curry at the AFR wrote this: PM's inch-deep COVID inquiry treats us all like idiots. It was inconceivable. The inquiry's terms of reference stated explicitly that actions taken unilaterally by state and territory governments are not in scope for the inquiry. That means almost everything that still gives people nightmares about COVID, school closures, lockdowns, state border closures, vaccine mandates, failed contact tracing and overzealous policing are all off limits. These are the actions that caused economic ruin, widespread heartache, mental health problems, and which set back the education of thousands of children. Now, when you have The Guardian aligned with the AFR on news angles, there is probably something to the story. So what on earth happened? Albanese had spoken about a royal commission prior to the 2022 election, and a Labor-stacked parliamentary committee had recommended it. Well, think back to May this year, when our political editor, Andrew Clennell, had an early scoop on the story.
Something not announced or funded in last week's budget was a Royal Commission-style inquiry into Australia's response to COVID, something we have been promised by the PM for some time. Last August, Anthony Albanese told me that such an inquiry would be convened as soon as practicable.
From opposition, I said that I couldn't envisage a circumstance where after you had a once-in-a-century global pandemic and an extraordinary response with the largest economic stimulus that we've ever seen at any time in Australia, that you would just move on and not have an examination of what went well, how things could be improved.
Could it be a year away before you announce some form of Royal Commission?
I would have thought that you'd want to do something as soon as practicable.
Now, Albanese did leave himself some wiggle room to not call a royal commission, but in my opinion, he should have been far clearer. So why does he not want to do a royal commission?
Now, I understand there was an informal discussion between premiers last year when it was roundly decided that there were issues in the health system arising out of the pandemic that needed to be addressed first before any pandemic inquiry. It's also been put to me that two premiers who might not be that enthusiastic about a Royal Commission at the moment were Anastasia Palaszczuk and Daniel Andrews. In fact, most leaders won't want their voters being reminded of the nasty time they had during the pandemic.
Well done to Andrew Clennell for staying on such an important story. And for the most part, a rare congratulations on this show to everyone in the media for seeing through the spin. I mean, can you believe Albanese actually said this?
One of the things that I want to do from the lessons as well is to ensure that we're positive, that the process of learning from the pandemic is constructive rather than destructive.
There was absolutely nothing positive about the pandemic, and it is an insult to suggest an inquiry into one of the darkest periods in our country's history should be positive. The Australian people deserve better than a watered-down inquiry, and while this may not be a clear and direct broken promise, I'm not sure voters will see it that way. Darren, let's start with you. Obviously, the pandemic is this massive part of everybody's life. I would argue that there have been royal commissions for lesser things that, yes, impactful as well, but surely this is something which is the most impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the decision to exclude the state governments, mean lockdowns and other quite draconian measures that had a profound impact on people's lives economically, socially, psychologically, will not be properly assessed. And I think as well there's been some commentary around the fact that some of the people handpicked to sit on this have made no secret of their own positions about lockdowns and other quite severe measures, and which kind of leaves the whole process open to accusations of sort of apprehended bias from the very beginning, which complicates it. And Australian people deserve no less than an inquiry, the likes of which we have seen in other countries around the world. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, exactly. And Kel, the other element to this is I can't remember the last time when I saw the AFR, the Guardian, Sky News, the ABC, all picking this exact line, the weakness in it. And just off the top of my head, the main weakness is they can't compel witnesses, and you don't have an independent judicial mind, drawing on what Darren was saying.
Yes.
You have this independent person, these three experts, they could provide submissions, but you really want somebody at the top of that pyramid directing the lines of questioning.
Can I say, I think you're right on the money. What is astonishing is the Albanese government no longer has the left-wing media in his pocket. He thought he had them nailed up. Anything he did, he could do anything, get away with it, because they just loved him so much and they hated the opposition so much. He could have a fake inquiry and they'd say, very good, thumbs up, elbow. It didn't happen. That's Phil Coorey in the AFR when he said Albanese is treating us like idiots. What is astonishing is he thought he'd get away with it. He actually thought, I'll have half an inquiry. We will carefully leave out lockdowns, the thing that everyone hated, that destroyed lives, that cost the economy billions. I'll leave that out and I'll run this little bit over here and everyone will think it's okay, I've kept my election promise. I mean, he thought he'd get away with it, Jack. What is going through someone's mind if they think they can pull such a shoddy three-card trick as that?
Yeah, it's a good point. And Darren, just picking up on that, sometimes in the media, we're not necessarily in step with public sentiment. Do you think that the public in itself will accept the need for just an inquiry, not a royal commission? Or do you think if there is a fairly unified media response that it will start to bleed through and then that would later hurt Albo in the polls?
I think people would like to see a very robust inquiry into this. I think, as you made a point in your op-ed today for Sky News, that people are still feeling the economic effects of the lockdown, the inflationary pressures. People are, looking down the back of the sofa for pennies or cents at the moment, I should say. So I agree. I think it's still, while the political class, some of them may have moved on or would like to move on, I don't think people have, and they're still feeling the effects, and some of them are still like explanations.
I mean, there's a generation of school children who are probably still paying the price for what they missed out on. There are the health, mental health effects still rolling on. So Darren's absolutely right. This hasn't stopped for most people. So they're not going to be on side, are they? Yeah,
particularly with the injection of cash into the economy. That's an inflationary mechanism. We know that has led to the mortgage increases, the cash rate increases. We're feeling that brunt now. I think a Royal Commission is very worthwhile.